After 9/11, a wealthy and very philanthropically oriented Muslim American family, the Ibrahims, decided they needed to do something to make a statement because their religion had been hijacked. That is what happened in 9/11. And they wanted to do something that would make a difference with young people that could be seeded around the country, not SEAT, but the seed, people that would actually be students of the Middle East, have some language acquisition, have some passion, and bring together the best and brightest American undergraduate students from the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian faiths. And so they started a program, and every year they chose an academic scholar that they vetted, and that scholar was charged with itinerating the students and leading them to the Middle East and identifying a series of countries, and they'd spend a month in the Middle East and do a little something before so they could have a preparation for a takeaway once they were in the Middle East, and then a postscript where they do something to follow up to sustain the project. And 4 years ago, they asked me if I would be that itinerant scholar that would travel with a group of students, and after 2 years, they asked me to become the director of the program, and I've been doing this for 3 years, and we have on the stage now a group of these students that are classic interfaith, not only different faiths, but sometimes the same faith, but with different variations and different ideas about that faith. And they've traipsed around the Middle East with me for a month, and they've gone to places like Saudi Arabia, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, Palestinian territories as well, and I left out, what did I leave out? Jordan. I left out Jordan. Jafar, you should be killing me. Yes, I'm hurt. Yes. So they're going to do this following exercise for all of you to partake of. Each one is going to introduce their name and say something about an identifier, something they want to share with you about whom they are, very briefly, and then they'll take 2 minutes or less. And I actually came in 1 minute over or under in my earlier session, so if I can do it, anyone in the world can do it. 2 minutes to talk about the one thing that was the most impactful thing they experienced. And then we'll have a brief discussion, sort of not a round table, but a linear weird table. So I'm going to ask people in a specific sequence. Nashwa, you'll go first, and I think you all know your numbers. I hope you do. Okay, see if we can count to 8 together. Go.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Nashwa Al-Sayed, and I am the assistant manager for the Ibrahim Leadership and Dialogue program with Queens College. 2 summers ago, I was selected as one of the student scholars to join the professor and other fellow students on the trip. And upon my return, I was hired to work for the program. A little bit about my background is that I am Egyptian Puerto Rican. I was raised in Egypt, and I studied here in Queens College, and my major was international relations with a focus on the Middle East. I applied for the program because it was the best opportunity for me to rediscover what the Middle East is all about. So upon my application, I was shocked to have been selected, but I am also very happy. And what makes this program very special to me, not just as a student, but also as a co-leader now, is that it brings together students who would normally not be in the same room together, and it allows them to travel through regions of conflict and regions of innovation, where they are together for a very short time, yet they experience so many situations that evokes emotions that they did not know that they once had. So almost always, all the students come back as best friends, as leaders, and as innovators to change this country and change the Middle East. So that's just a little bit about my pitch as the assistant manager.
Yeah, my name is James Stewart. I am a third year studying political science at the University of California, Berkeley. And I am honored to be here today, honored to be speaking before all of you and getting to share what is the great news about this wonderful program that I had the opportunity to go on. A little bit about my background. I come from a background of studying this region largely from a political sense and an academic area. And so for me, this trip was a really wonderful experience to get to personalize issues and personalize a region that I only seen on paper and on computers and heard talked about. And so being able to sit down next to someone who is really living and breathing this area has been a wonderful opportunity. And I cannot say enough to those who are considering perhaps this program in the future to not let an academic interest or lack of personal background hold you back.
I'm not going to let this go on because I made a mistake. What I'd like you to do after you've identified yourself, and Nashwa, we'll come back to you in a second, I'd like for you to also, after you've identified yourself, give one incident, one thing you've taken away from your month in this program and since you've come back that you think is now engraved in you for a next chunk of time. What was the thing you most took away?
Sure.
So Nashwa, we'll double back to you. After you introduce yourself, what is the impact, one single thing that you find most passionately about? Think most passionately about.
Me first?
You can go back to Nashwa, okay.
So of course, along the trip, there are very intense moments that I remember very clearly. But I would just go back to the last summer, and it was while we were in Jerusalem, and it was one day that the Muslim students decided to go pray at Al-Aqsa. It just happened that this day was also a Jewish holiday, and the students who went to pray at Al-Aqsa, unfortunately, they did not allow the male students to go in and pray. So the male students decided to pray outside in the street. While they were praying, they were exposed to heckling by some of the Israelis there. And when the students came back and they spoke to the professor about it and how they felt, some of the Jewish students came along and said that what happened to them, what happened to the Muslim students, did not represent their identity, their mentality, and their thinking, and that this behavior was unacceptable and unjustifiable. And that moment where the Muslim students were speaking to the Jewish students one-on-one as humans, identifying that this is a crisis, that it doesn't matter what political or religious background, it is not acceptable on all terms. It was a moment that really showed me the bond that the students can build on this program, as well as the level and the depth of faith and religious understanding that happens on this trip. And it was a moment that really always gives me goosebumps, because this is what the program is all about, is to have a moment of heart to heart, of understanding, of pure empathy. And this is just one of the examples as to why this program is so important.
In my instance, has to be another example of expanded empathy and understanding issues from a new perspective. I remember very distinctly our group had the opportunity to visit a settlement in Shiloh in the West Bank, and we had the opportunity to speak with a young woman who had decided to raise her family in this area. And so, again, from an academic perspective, I've done negotiation simulations where settlements have always come up as an issue. But being able to sit across the table from a woman in her home and just see the passion in her eyes and the conviction to raise her children in an area in this area that has such religious significance to her, really gave a new level of understanding for me in my interest, and it really complicated the narrative that I had held previously, and I'll never forget that look she gave me. And it's with that I pursue a future in this region that that empathy is really key.
You can do one big applause at the end and save them the minutes to use to talk to you.
Why, when it's my turn?
I'm picking on you again. What can I tell you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lulete Mola, and I graduated from the University of Minnesota this past May with a degree in political science and family violence prevention. My background includes gender analysis, social justice, and integrating intersectional approaches to finding resolutions in domestic social justice, but also with my trip to the Middle East and my interest in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So one thing that stuck with me, Nashwa said exactly what I was thinking. The themes that I experienced was history, intervention, and prevention of conflict, and of course, innovation, keeping up with the spirit of this gathering today. I really got to experience innovation when we were in Tel Aviv, Israel. I was really inspired by the startups that we visited and the bond that I saw existed between Jewish people in Tel Aviv and Jewish people in New York, how they were helping one another and really creating startups that not necessarily serve only Israeli people, but mostly the American consumer population. I thought that was very strong, and me being ethnically Ethiopian, I was very passionate about bringing that bond and what I learned back here to my immigrant community. With conflict, we met with Palestinian resistance freedom fighters when we were in the Palestinian territories. And with our current situation, you know, everything happening in Ferguson and New York with injustice killings that I'm very passionate about, that moment of new ways that some Palestinian freedom fighters find to resist oppression has really resonated with me and comes to my mind a lot as I work to resist systematic oppression here in the US. So this trip was extremely life-changing and something that is still very surreal for me. Thank you.
Could you clarify what it was that you characterize as resistance that you found so important to take with you?
Sure. The freedom fighter that we met with was Basim Tamim, and he was just released out of prison when he met with us. I think he was released in March, and he met with us in June. And he was telling us about the different ways that he resisted or opposed settlers in his territory. He has been accused of organizing youth to throw stones, and we all know, the discourse conflict that exists about our, Palestinian young children heroes for throwing stones. Is that symbolic of a greater resistance? But just the passion that he communicated with us without hate. I think I heard a lot of love for his people instead of hate for the people he disagreed with. And I think that is very important in resisting any oppression, making sure that one is doing it for the love of their own people instead of the hate of the opposition. I hope that's as clear out as it is in my mind. Yes? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ahmed Yousaf. I would just like to reiterate and thank you all for coming here and spending your Sunday evening listening about recent innovations that are happening in the Middle East. I've been born and raised in a very small city known as Charleston, West Virginia. It's the capital city, but nonetheless is a very small place. And I am a Pakistani Muslim American, and this idea of being a Muslim American has been an identity that I've wrestled with for quite some time, and also led me to develop an interest in the Middle East, and hence is why I decided to be a part of this program. I'd first like to just comment on what Nashwa said regarding the pivotal experiences that she described regarding the heckling that happened at the Temple Mount. In one of our post discussions afterwards, talking about that experience, Daniel, who will soon introduce himself, apologized for one of the actions that the Israeli Jewish young children had made. They had barked at some of the Muslims who were praying, since when they get on all fours, it looks like they're a four-legged animal. So Daniel had apologized for that action, but I really felt no need for such a thing, for Daniel to apologize. One of the ways that I look at in different individuals and how it all fits together, different forms of oppression, is that an individual's action is held to his or her own accord, and that I think that people should not judge on cultural or religious lines. And I think that apologizing, although I do respect Daniel for doing that, it was a very nice gesture on his part, does in its own way reinforce segmentation. So there is a duty, I guess, for us to try to, as Ibrahim fellows, to try to dissolve that barrier. So Professor Rosenblum has insisted that I talk about one experience, and unfortunately I could not do that. There were too many experiential moments during the trip.
You can have a seminar at breakfast tomorrow, and they can all come and listen, because I'm sure you could fill up a day.
Right. So I'll talk about two. Is that fine? 2 experiences?
2 minutes.
Okay. So one of the experiences, one of the things I garnered from the program, I think this is a common theme you've heard, is that its true essence is learning about human narratives, really experiencing what it's like to be put in these situations. You hear about it all over in the news in America, but it really doesn't shake you until you've been there and you put yourself in their shoes. So one of those was we all had made a trip to the West Bank in Ramallah, and while we were walking around, we came upon this demonstration where children and adults both were protesting the imprisonment of a Palestinian, and unfortunately I couldn't probe very much what was happening. There was a lot of hustle bustle in the area, but it was very visible that there was a very tense situation in a very formal, organized manner, but this very tense situation amongst the crowd really enlightened me of how one imprisonment can make an impact on a community. And if you try to expand that on different magnitudes, orders of magnitudes, that's the current situation that it is today in terms of the human experience in that area. So it really does jar you a little bit to think about how impactful just one imprisonment can be. The second thing I'm going to really quickly run through before my 2 minutes are up here is although there are a lot of, I'd say, violent efforts that are roaming in the area, there are also a lot of people in the communities trying their best to bring semblances of hope. And we all heard Bashar al-Masri's hope that he's trying to bring through the city of Rawabi. Another one we had the opportunity of meeting with was from the Daniel Abraham Center for Middle East Peace, and we met a research consultant there, Dan Rotham, who had meticulously researched land swaps to see if the diminishing probabilities of a two-state solution was still a possibility. And it was at that point I had really recognized how complex the issue really is, of having to investigate moving each Israeli citizen, each Palestinian citizen to 2 different areas to try to even bring up the possibility of having a 2-state solution. All of this, I think, complements bringing into just shedding light on how complex of an issue these conflicts can really be, and how impactful they are to individual lives.
Yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Fahmida and I'm a junior at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm currently studying biology and Near Eastern languages and civilizations. I know they're like complete opposite, but those are like my two passions. And so I guess the reason why I decided to go on this trip is because I was always really passionate about this region. And like prior to actually going on the trip, I had taken a few classes at school regarding the Middle East, and like it just all made sense to like actually go to this region and like learn by engaging. And I think that's like the thing that I cherished the most about this experience, that I was able to engage and you know, actually communicate with like the people that are telling these stories, because it's their stories and it's really important to hear it from them. And so I really appreciate that. And I feel like it's such a rare opportunity, so I'm grateful for it. So my one incident, I had like a lot, just like Ahmed, but I think the most salient for me was during our stay in Jerusalem. One day we were touring through Jerusalem with Danny Seidman, who's a Jerusalem expert, and we were overlooking the West Bank. And I remember like he was talking to us, and we were all in a cluster, and I was, you know, at the edge of the cluster, and like on my side I saw 3 Palestinian boys, and I saw them staring at us. But that was kind of normal because almost everywhere we went, we got stares, because we were such a diverse group of people, and everyone was just curious to know, like, oh, what are they doing? Especially considering, like, me, like, someone who wears the hijab, with someone like Daniel, who is obviously, you know, an Orthodox Jew. You don't see that kind of thing just randomly in Jerusalem or even in Israel or Palestine. So when we were at when we were overlooking the West Bank and I saw these Palestinian boys, I saw them staring at us, but I thought that was normal. And then they started to pass us, but then they came back, and one of them actually approached me and asked me if I was Muslim. And I had gotten that before, like a bunch of times throughout Old City, the West Bank, Jerusalem, everywhere. So I just answered him and I said, yeah, I am Muslim. And then the next thing he said to me is what really got to me and really, I guess, impacted me. He told me, you are good. And he basically put a thumbs up, like, good for being Muslim. And I know that's like a small gesture, and like for anyone else it might not mean much, but for me, I feel like it really impacted me in a lot of ways, like emotionally. I was kind of scarred because it just made me feel really uncomfortable that these young boys who were no older than 14 years old, they had just validated me based on my religion. Because I was Muslim, they said that I was good, and I was good because I was Muslim. That meant I was better than a Jew, or I was better than the enemy, and I didn't believe that at all. You know, I don't see myself, or I don't consider myself better than like anyone else, like no less a Jew. And so just to feel that uncomfort was really like impactful for me. And yeah, like I even expressed this to my peers, but like that moment, it just made me realize like how polarized the whole situation is, especially in Jerusalem itself. There's so much tension, and you just have to to actually understand it. You actually have to be there and like experience these kind of individual encounters, because those are the most meaningful, and I feel like those capture, you know, the day in the life of an average Palestinian boy or an average Israeli boy. So, yeah, that was the most meaningful to me.
In fact, you were so sensitive when you began to express this and begin to have a small meltdown. People didn't really understand it in our group until you articulated your sensibility of what a Muslim from your point of view would think and feel, not better than. It was one of the bonding moments, clearly, in terms of the tour. I think we have 3 other people yet to go. Jafar, and then Jen, and then Daniel.
So hello everyone, thank you for coming out here tonight. My name is Jafar Al-Tal. I was born and raised in Jordan, Amman, Jordan. And I'm a student at Virginia Tech's sophomore year. I'm double majoring in management and finance. And the thing that affected me the most during the trip was when we met with Danny Seidman. He was a former head of the Yesha Settlement Council, which means that he has a big word in the settlements that go on in the West Bank.
Danny Danone, you got him. Danny Seidman you mentioned? Did you say Seidman?
Danny Dayan.
Dayan, yeah.
Did I say Seidman?
Yeah, it's okay.
All right,
That's what I heard.
Danny Dayan, sorry. When we met with him, well, my perspective of the conflict would be, because I was born and raised in Jordan, like you get the mentality of the Palestinians and what the Palestinian struggle has been going through. So it kind of got intertwined with my identity as a Jordanian. So once we started talking to him, one thing that really resonated with me is that the passion that he had and the driving force behind the words that he spoke to us. Although I disagreed completely with everything that he said, the way he said it and the way he stood up for his ideology, although it was absurd for me, was eye-opening, because a person with that much power and that much passion can change the world, and depends in which hands the power falls into. So basically, to sum it all up, the passion that people have towards anything, whether it's an ideology, an exam you're going to take, or towards a person, the passion that you have is eventually the driving force that will decide whether or not you do something or not. Thank you.
Jen?
Hi, my name is Jenny Koshner. I'm a senior at Barnard College, majoring in religion and minoring in environmental sciences. Just, I guess, to give a little bit about my background, I was born and raised in the Midwest in Missouri. I'm the daughter of a Reform rabbi. I grew up going to a conservative Jewish day school, and currently my practice and beliefs I align more with the modern Orthodox movement. There were a lot of moments in the trip that were very powerful and impactful, as you've seen from the wonderful people I got to spend a month of my summer with. But for me, the one moment that stands out most clearly was when we were in Oman. We were graciously invited into the home of a sheikh. He had formerly served in the government, specifically in the economic sector, and he had prepared a really wonderful feast. That's really the only way to describe it for us, and we were sitting down to eat. Throughout the trip, I had a lot of difficulty in different countries that we've been in because I personally observe the Jewish dietary laws of kashrut. So when I was at the sheikh's home, I ended up actually sitting across the table from him, and he'd noticed that I wasn't taking any food specifically because of my dietary restrictions, and he started getting a little bit worried. And he was talking actually to Jafar, luckily, because Jafar is fluent in Arabic. And he was talking to Jafar, asking him why I wasn't taking food on my plate. And I could sense that the sheikh was getting very worried and very uncomfortable. And I started taking some food that I thought would be okay, that I could have a little bit of salad, different things like that. And Jafar was translating between the sheikh and I, and Jafar told me that the sheikh had been really appreciated. He had been trying to welcome me into his home by providing food for me, and he understood that because of my religious obligations, I was unable to actually consume that food, but he was impressed with the fact that I had made the gesture of actually putting the food on my plate and accepting his hospitality, which in turn felt that because I had given him respect, he could in turn offer me respect, which I thought was one of the fundamental values of our trip, I would say, that although we all come from so many different cultures and backgrounds, just the fundamental act of making the effort to understand each other and making the effort to understand where someone is coming from and approach them on their own terms is what makes all the difference, and that's what will ultimately be able to make change and progress possible.
Daniel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Kaplan. I am a junior here at Queens College studying neuroscience and minoring in chemistry. I was born and raised right here in Kew Gardens Hills, Queens, not too far from here. And so you may be wondering what a modern Orthodox Jewish boy would end up doing in so many faraway countries, other than Israel, of course. And I think it's important to note at this time where my background falls in terms of Israel and the Middle East as a whole. My family for the past 17 summers has been traveling to and vacationing in the heart of the West Bank in a settlement known as Ofra. And my entire life from age 4 to 18, every single summer, for 2 months a year, my family picks up and we used to spend the entire summer in the heart of the West Bank. And when I saw this trip, I couldn't think that I would have an opportunity in front of me and not take it. I had an opportunity to potentially see lands that I would never see otherwise, that I would never travel to on my own for sure. And so I decided to apply and see what would happen, and I'm very happy I did. I had a great time, great experiences, learned a lot, and made great friends that are sitting with me right here. And we've heard a lot about what goes on or what went on when we were there in Israel and the West Bank, the tension that we saw in Jerusalem, and it's all real. And for all those who have been in Jerusalem, in Israel as a whole, you know the tension. You don't need some students to come and tell you all about it, because for those who have seen it, it's the reality, and it's a hard reality to deal with. And so I'm going to take you to a story in Oman, like we just heard from Jenny, that really gave me hope in what I see as a land of tension and turmoil, and one that made me think that maybe there is a different future to come. On our last night in Oman, we ate at the Diplomatic Club, which is on Embassy Row in the heart of Muscat, Oman. And when we got there, the lady who was taking us around in Oman, who was an expat who has been living in Oman for approximately the past 20 years, turned to me and the other kosher-eating students, and said, "Oh, I explained to the head waiter here that I need kosher food for this meal, so he's going to explain to you how he prepared kosher food." And it was evident quite quickly that the way he had prepared his kosher food was just not going to be permissible for us to eat it, and it wasn't up to the standards that we hold by for kashrut, for keeping kosher under the laws that we have. And he felt really bad about this, and we said to him, "Is somebody going to be able to eat this?" And he said, "Sure, no problem. The rest of the group is eating this, and I can assure you by the time the evening was done, that entire dish was gone." But he said, "That's not enough for us. It's not about the food, it's about you." So we said, "Okay, well, what do you want us to do?" So he said, "Tell me, what do I need to make you kosher fish right here in Oman?" So we started explaining to him. He asked, we gave him a true answer. We said to him, "Well, you would need a new pan, because we don't know what's been in the pans that you've cooked in. We would need a new knife, because I don't know what's been cut with the knife that you've used." And we went on and explained to him, and he said to me, "Okay, give me 5 minutes." And he returns after 5 minutes, and he says to us, "In 10 minutes, you're going to have kosher fish on your plate right in front of you." And we looked at him as if he was nuts. We just said, didn't we just explain to you that for kosher fish under the standards that we have, you need, a new pan, a new knife, etc. And he said to me, "Don't worry, I got you covered. You said new pan, right?" We said, "Yes." So he said, "I opened you a new pan. You said a new knife, right?" We said, "Yes." He said, "I opened you a new knife." And he went on and he said, "You said I can only use that knife once I've opened it, right?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, don't worry, I'm only using your knife, nothing else." And about 10 minutes later, sure enough, the three of us who were keeping kosher had fish right in front of us on our plate in the heart of Oman, in literally a faraway land that the last time, for sure, an Orthodox Jew of sorts was there was a few thousand years ago, probably in the time of our forefathers. And here I was, this Jewish boy, sitting there eating kosher fish. And it made me think, is that the future that could potentially be? And it made me realize that a lot of what goes on in the Middle East is very regional. There are different parts of the Middle East. Not all of the Middle East is the same. And it made me really think about what are the differences between the regions, and how does that affect the future of the region as a whole?
I just want to thank you for giving them an opportunity to share. In a summary fashion, this tour for a month together with students that you hear have different ideas and attitudes on some fundamental issues, but they experienced together the awesome and the gruesome. And in fact, there was gruesome. We were sitting, as we were getting ready to leave the United Arab Emirates, and the city of Mosul fell to the so-called Islamic State. So we saw some majestic things, both in terms of nature, in terms of human activity, but they understand that this is part of the reality that they're coping with. And if you have anyone in your family of any faith whatsoever, or faithless, and they're a student somewhere in the United States, and they've demonstrated leadership skills, and they're academically excelling, and they want to take a chance in getting into a competitive, very competitive, this is national competition to come in. And so thank you for giving them a chance to share a few of their stories.